Stop your hand. Stop your breath for a single moment. Do not scroll past believing your trivial habit brought you here. You think boredom moved your fingers, that you were simply looking for something to fill the hollow ache in your chest. But in the vast and dark fabric of existence, chance is only the excuse of cowards and the consolation of the ignorant. What ordinary men call coincidence, the ancient initiates recognized as the unshakable law of the vibratory echo. The world beneath your feet is not a chaotic stage. It is an immense, silent ocean of invisible forces that responds with terrifying precision to the silent cry of your own consciousness. If this message has appeared before your eyes at this precise millisecond of your life, it is because your soul emitted a signal of desperation or of absolute hunger. You asked for a way out. You demanded an answer the masses could never give you. The universe, in its cold and mathematical obedience, simply moved the threads of fate and placed this naked truth exactly in your path. This is not a suggestion. It is an inescapable calling. You have been summoned. What you are about to hear is not docile philosophy to comfort the weak, nor empty hope for those who enjoy their role as victims. This is the knowledge reserved for the few, the hidden doctrine that has been guarded in the shadows to protect it from the profanation of the mediocre. By hearing these words, you are crossing a threshold from which there is no possible return. If you decide to leave now, you can go back to your shallow sleep and pretend you were never here. But if you stay, if you allow this voice to penetrate the halls of your mind, you must know that you are signing an irrevocable contract with your own destiny. Ignorance will cease to be your protective shield. Once the veil is torn away and you contemplate the naked laws that govern the material world, you will be condemned to the responsibility of greatness. Assume the consequences. The heavy door of initiation has opened wide. Enter if you dare. Chapter 1. The leakage of attention and the forge of radioactive magnetism. There is a silent, perpetual, and devastating robbery being executed in broad daylight before the eyes of all humanity. From the moment the sun rises on the horizon until night covers the fields, ordinary men and women walk through life with the veins of their spirit wide open, bleeding drop by drop, in the streets, in the squares, in the intimacy of their own rooms. It is not physical blood. It is not silver coins. It is something far deeper and more final. It is the vampirism of vital energy, the relentless flight of attention. Civilization has been conditioned to believe that attention is a simple cognitive process, a mechanical function of the brain that allows us to focus our sight or parse a sound. You were taught that watching foreign tragedies, listening to gossip, or consuming the world's scandals are harmless pastimes, simple ways to kill the boredom of dead hours. This is the most colossal and poisonous lie ever conceived to keep humanity on its knees. In the sanctuaries of forbidden knowledge, mental alchemy dictates an iron law. Attention is not a passive act. Attention is a literal, dense, and quantifiable emanation of creative force. It is the prana of the Eastern sages. the vril of the initiates, the fluid of the ether. Your attention is the conduit through which your soul feeds matter. That upon which you rest your gaze receives your immortality. The thing to which you give the focus of your mind receives a direct transfusion of your own life force. In this chapter, we close the wounds through which your power escapes. You will learn to recognize the forces of the outside world that feed on your energy. You will master the cruel and necessary art of tactical apathy. And you will discover that by sealing the fissures of your attention, vital energy will accumulate inside you until you become a radioactive colossus, a being endowed with a magnetism capable of bending the will of the earth without moving a single muscle. The forge begins now. To understand the blindness of the man who wastes his vital energy, we must travel to the ancient teachings of the desert monks who knew the absolute value of silence and containment. Old scrolls tell that in the center of a remote oasis, a hermit cared for a sacred pond. Its waters were crystalline and pure. They possessed the virtue of making the most beautiful, fragrant lotuses bloom, flowers that granted unshakable peace to whoever contemplated them. The secret of the pond resided in its depth and its stillness. It was fed by a small underground spring, but the hermit had built a perfect stone wall around it. Not a single drop escaped into the desert. All the energy of the spring accumulated in the center, creating the pressure necessary to sustain the life of the lotuses. One day, a young traveler arrived at the oasis. Seeing the beauty of the pond, he felt an impulsive desire to share that water with the world. The hermit warned him. The water of the sacred spring was limited, its purpose to nourish the flowers of inner wisdom, not to water the sterile sands outside. But the young man, moved by a restless and false compassion, ignored the elder. He took a chisel and began making small fissures in the stone wall. He opened a crack for water to run toward some dry brambles, then another to wet the dust of the road, then another to feed passing insects. At first, it seemed the pond had plenty. The young man felt proud. But weeks later, the underground spring could not compensate for the multiple leaks. The water level began to drop dramatically. The pressure vanished. The mud at the bottom was exposed to the scorching sun, and the magic lotuses, deprived of the volume of water necessary to sustain their stems, withered, dried, and died. When the young man returned, he found no flowers and no peace, only a hole of dry mud. And those brambles, roads, and insects to which he had given the water remained exactly the same. Sterile brambles, dry dust, ephemeral creatures that returned not even a shadow of gratitude. He had destroyed the source. Observe with lucidity how you repeat day after day the tragedy of that young traveler. Your physical body houses an underground spring of creative energy, but of a precise flow. That energy was given to you with a single divine purpose: to make the lotus of your own greatness bloom, to forge your empire, to elevate your consciousness and endow you with a magnetic gravity that orders your own universe. But instead of building a wall of silence and containment around your mind, you take the chisel of morbid curiosity and open cracks in the fortress of your skull. You wake up in the morning and open the gates of attention before cultivating your own spirit. You pour your vital energy onto news of distant wars you cannot stop, onto city crimes, onto the scandals of men and women whose lives lack all nobility. You hand over your flow of ether to empty entertainment, to the noise of the market, to the miserable opinions of those who live in the mud. You believe you are only observing, but in the realm of hermeticism, to observe is to feed. That which you look at, you nourish with your own life. The material universe is a hungry kingdom. Tragic events and social dramas are the dry brambles, etheric parasites that lack their own light. To exist, to stay alive in the collective consciousness, they need to feed on the emotional reaction and sustained attention of millions of voluntary slaves. Every time you feel indignation at a corrupt ruler, you are sending a ray of your pure energy directly to that system. Your anger does not weaken them. Your anger is a tribute, a succulent delicacy that makes them stronger because you have given them your precious attention. Every time you listen to the poisonous gossip of a peer and immerse yourself in the judgment of another's life, you have just opened another fissure in your sacred pond. The vampirism of the ether does not require creatures of the night to bite your neck. It only requires that they keep you distracted. While your attention is fragmented in 1,000 different directions, worried about public opinion, fearful of global disasters, you will never have the internal pressure necessary to materialize power. You are a giant bleeding from 1,000 tiny cuts, stumbling from fatigue before noon, wondering why life is so heavy, and why your projects of wealth and nobility never bloom. They do not bloom because there is no water in the pond. You have given it all away. The leak must stop now if you wish to reclaim your throne and your light. To seal the fissures, you must first look the parasite in the eye and understand its nature. The outside world, in its mundane conformation, is a spectacle designed to keep you in a state of hypnosis. The existence of the masses is dominated by what the ancient occultists called the larvae of the astral, real energetic formations created by collective fear, anxiety, and morbidity. These forces operate through whispers of people, through media, and through manufactured crisis. Their only goal is to prevent you from looking inward. They know that if man discovers his power, they lose control. A man who is master of his own attention is impossible to govern, impossible to frighten, and impossible to squeeze. The sovereign understands that his greatest act of love toward the universe is not bleeding while crying for the tragedies of the world, but becoming a beacon of unshakable power. A lighthouse does not run back and forth trying to save ships from drowning. A lighthouse plants itself firmly on the rock, accumulates all its fire in the center of its tower, and shines with such intensity that the ships find the way on their own. You do not serve humanity by being a bleeding slave. Your only sacred duty is to your fire. We arrive now at the sharpest and most ruthless tool in the initiate's arsenal, tactical apathy. In the morality of the weak, apathy is a sin. They tell you that not caring is selfishness, But on the path of power, selective apathy is the warrior's shield. It is the capacity to look at the drama, the provocation, and the noise of the outside world and decide with mathematical coldness to deny them access to the sacred chamber of your consciousness. To execute tactical apathy, you must become a jealous and tyrannical guardian of the gates of your mind. You must institute an obsidian filter between your eyes and the world. Every time information, a conversation, or an event tries to capture your gaze, you must subject it to one unnegotiable question. Does this elevate my empire, purify my spirit, or multiply my wealth? Or is it simply a thief? If the answer is that it is a thief who comes to steal your breath, the sentence must be immediate and absolute. You do not debate with distraction. You do not justify yourself. You simply withdraw your attention like one who turns his gaze away from a stone in the road. Let men discuss the political climate. You will keep your silence. Let your acquaintances crawl in the mud of jealousy and mutual resentment. When they come to tell you their poison, you will stand up and leave the room without giving explanations. Let the news announce the end of the world every dawn. Your world will not end, because the keys to your destiny do not reside on the outside. You are free. The act of violently withdrawing your attention from the mundane will produce a shock in your environment. At first, people will call you arrogant. They will say you have become inaccessible, cold, distant. The parasite will writhe with hunger and bang on your walls, demanding that you return the food of your emotions. Endure that pressure. Enjoy the offense of the weak. Their anger is the undeniable proof that you have ceased to be their prey. You have sealed the fissures of your pond. The water of your life no longer spills onto dead sands. You are accumulating the pressure necessary for true creation. The silence is your fortress, and your focus is your greatest weapon. What happens when a mighty river is stopped by an immense dam? The water that was once dispersed gently across the plain begins to accumulate. Its level rises inexorably. Its weight multiplies by millions of tons. And that accumulated pressure, when channeled through the correct turbines, is capable of lighting nations. This is the exact physics of contained attention. When you spend days, weeks, and months applying tactical apathy, when you stop spilling your energy in anger, idle lust, gossip, and fear, the vril, your vital energy, has nowhere to escape. The force that was once dissipated now crashes against the sealed walls of your own consciousness. The energy returns toward the center. It accumulates in your chest. It descends toward your belly. Your physical body becomes a high-pressure furnace. In esoteric texts, this process is called the condensation of the aura. At first, you will feel this accumulation as physical discomfort, a strange heat in your entrails, a nervous energy that struggles to get out. Your ego, addicted to bleeding, will beg you to turn on a screen, to seek a conflict, to seek someone's approval, to open the escape valve and relieve the pressure. The mandate of alchemy is: endure the burn. Do not open the valve. You must tame that wild force and make it stay. Sit in absolute silence. close your eyes. Breathe, forcing that accumulated energy to circulate through your spine, nourishing your cells, hardening your will, and expanding the limits of your consciousness. When you keep your energy sealed, your vibration changes state. You cease to be a porous and light body dragged by any current of air. You become a mass of immeasurable gravity, dense, dark, and brilliant, like hematite. It is in this state of divine pressurization where the most terrifying and fascinating phenomenon a human being can experience occurs: the birth of radioactive magnetism. When a man or woman needs nothing from the outside world, when they do not seek to be looked at, when they do not beg to be heard, their presence becomes lethal. When your attention rests with absolute weight upon your own center, you no longer need to force your charisma. You do not need to speak loudly to dominate a room. You enter in silence, with the calm gaze of one whose pond is overflowing with life inside, and the atmosphere densifies. The scattered, bleeding, and weak minds of those around you instinctively detect the immensity of your contained power. They feel the heat of your forge. They perceive, at the most primitive level of their being, that they are before a colossus who possesses the energy they lack. And without knowing why, they surrender to your will. They offer you their resources. They open armored doors for you. They give you the gold of their chests. They are enchanted by the gravitational force of a soul that has learned the art of absolute containment. Your gaze becomes a weapon of millimetric precision. Since all your attention has been concentrated, the day you decide voluntarily and tactically to rest your gaze on an objective, the laser beam of your consciousness pulverizes any obstacle in fractions of seconds. Matter melts before the intensity of your focus because there are no fissures through which the heat escapes. Take awareness at this very moment of the open source through which you are pouring the blood of your spirit. Recognize the vampires around you, not with hate, for hate is also a leak of energy, but with the cold and absolute indifference of the king who closes the doors of his palace to beggars in the middle of the night. The era of giving away your immortality in exchange for the trinkets of entertainment has ended. Reclaim the command of your eyes. Reclaim the empire of your ears. Demand with a sacred cruelty that everything which requires your attention pays the tribute corresponding to the presence of a sovereign. Seal the cracks of the pond. Let the water accumulate until the walls of your body tremble under the weight of infinite power. Cultivate the lotus of greatness in the strictest solitude. And when the vessel of your attention is full to the brim, dense and radioactive, stand up. Walk among the shadows of the world, not as frightened prey, but as the inexhaustible pit of gravity to which all the riches of the earth will be forced to precipitate. The world is now your stage, and your silence is the conductor of its new rhythm. To know, to dare, to will, and to keep silent. The first three pillars raise the temple of greatness, but it is the fourth, the unshakable silence, that is the stone vault holding the weight of the gods. If the silence is broken, the entire temple collapses upon the builder's head. There is a tragic weakness, a vulgar and pestilential vice that condemns the vast majority of the human race to perpetual mediocrity. It is not the lack of intelligence, it is not the scarcity of opportunities, it is not the absence of initial will. It is a disease that dwells in the tongue. It is the hysterical, desperate, and infantile need to speak before the time. Observe the inertial man when a spark of inspiration touches his spirit. When he conceives a plan of conquest, when he decides to forge a commercial empire, transform his body, or claim an elusive love, a sacred fire is lit within him. That spark grants him a strength he did not know he possessed. But instead of taking that incandescent ember, swallowing it, keeping it in the center of his chest, and using its heat to feed the motor of his will, the weak man runs to the public squares. He finds his friends, his family, his colleagues, and he opens his mouth. He speaks of his plans with exaggerated eloquence. He describes the castle he is going to build with an astonishing luxury of detail. He announces his victories before having wielded the sword. And while he speaks, while he receives the pats on the back and the looks of false admiration from those who listen, he does not realize that he is committing a true alchemical suicide. He does not perceive that with every syllable that leaves his lips, the sacred fire escapes, cools, and dissipates into the dead air of the outside world. Weeks later, that brilliant man finds himself paralyzed, void of energy, without understanding why his motivation has disappeared and why his great project is just a castle of smoke. In the mysteries of hidden metaphysics, the supreme law of materialization demands a discipline that terrifies the vain ego, the law of concealment. Every birth, every colossal creation demands the womb of darkness and the protection of absolute silence. To understand the violence with which the world destroys that which is exposed before its time, we must descend to the damp basements of old Prague, where the true masters of transmutation guarded the secrets of fire and metals. The heavy tomes of tradition tell that there existed an alchemist of immense and very unique power. He took under his wing a young apprentice of brilliant mind but vain spirit. For years the master taught him the secrets of proportions, the purification of lead, and the mysteries of continuous fire. The day arrived when they had to execute the great work, the transmutation of dross into pure gold. The master introduced the matter into a heavy crucible of iron and sealed it with the mythical seal of Hermes, ensuring that not even the smallest slit allowed the passage of air. They placed the crucible inside the Athenor, the sacred furnace, and lit the flames. The master's mandate was severe. The fire must burn for 40 days. The crucible must remain sealed in the heat of the shadows. If the seal is broken before the sun rises on the morning of the 40th day, the volatile essence will escape. The cold of the world will profane the chamber, and the matter will rot forever. The master left for the mountains to meditate in peace, leaving the apprentice in charge of feeding the fire. During the first 30 days, the young man fulfilled his labor with devotion. The pressure inside the furnace was immense. The crucible vibrated and emitted a dull hum, a song of latent power that announced the miracle brewing inside. But on the 39th day, vanity ate his will. Knowing that the next day he would become the owner of an incalculable treasure, he could not bear the weight of his own secret. He wanted to see the admiration in the eyes of his old companions. He wanted to be crowned as a genius before the work was finished. That night the apprentice invited 3 friends. He brought them to the basement, bragged of his wisdom, and to prove he was not lying, he took heavy iron tongs, ignored the supreme law, and slightly opened the lid of the glowing crucible so his friends could see the radiance of the transmuted matter. In that exact instant, cold air penetrated the chamber. There was no grand explosion. Only an agonizing hiss was heard, like the sigh of a ghost escaping into the shadows. The red and golden glow that illuminated the bottom of the crucible went out suddenly, swallowed by an instantaneous darkness. When the master returned at dawn on the 40th day and saw the broken seal, he did not shout. He walked to the furnace, tipped the crucible onto the stone table, and instead of the dazzling gold that should have crowned the great work, only a pile of gray, cold, putrid, and useless dross fell out. The old man looked into the terrified eyes of the apprentice, and with a coldness that froze the blood, dictated his final sentence. Gold is forged only in the cloister of secrecy. The open mouth is the freezing wind of ruin. You have traded the empire of kings for the ephemeral wonder of beggars. You are banished. The lesson was final. The apprentice lost everything for a moment of vanity. Silence is the only way to protect the gold of your soul from the cold world. You are the Athenor, and your great purposes are the matter inside the crucible. In the science of the invisible, all creation obeys the law of hermetic pressure. Observe the strength of water vapor. If you heat water in an uncovered vessel, the liquid transforms into a harmless cloud of steam that floats lazily and dissipates away, unable to move even a feather. But if you lock that same amount of water in a hermetically sealed steel boiler and apply the fire of your will, the steam, finding no way out, begins to accumulate a colossal, brutal, indomitable pressure. That pressure can drag a train of 1,000 tons through mountains. The creative intention that is born in your spirit possesses exactly the same volatile nature as steam. When you conceive a dream of greatness, your consciousness raises the temperature of your vital energy. If you seal your lips, if you swallow the urge to tell it, that energy has nowhere to escape. It remains inside, growing in force. Unable to manifest in the outside world through the easy and cheap route of words, the energy accumulates inside you, increasing the psychic pressure to unbearable levels. This internal pressure is blessed. It is the fuel of the gods. But what does the fragile man do? He heats the water of his enthusiasm and leaves the vessel uncovered. By talking about his projects, he uses the word as an escape valve. The steam comes out of his mouth, and as it exits, the internal pressure decreases. His spirit cools. Suddenly, the wild urgency to act disappears because the creative energy has already dissipated into the atmosphere. It has become a harmless cloud of cheap talk. To speak is the abortion of action. force is lost in the telling. Whoever recounts his battles before fighting them exhausts the strength he needed to hold the sword. The true warrior remains silent until the enemy is defeated and the objective is won. Silence is the only wall that can contain the explosive power of your soul. To truly seal your lips, you must understand what pushes you to open them with such desperation. You must look directly at the disease of the ego. The human ego is a starving beggar that feeds on external validation. It is obsessed with recognition, with the admiration of others, with the need to feel important in their eyes. When you have an extraordinary project in hand, the ego knows that if you keep silent and work in the dark, it will spend months or years without receiving applause. The ego abhors that weight. Therefore, it convinces you that it is a good idea to share your plans with the tribe, seeking false support. In the instant you tell your acquaintances that you are going to found an immense company or write a masterpiece, a nefarious biological and esoteric phenomenon occurs. Your friends look at you with wonder. They congratulate you. They say it's a brilliant idea. You are a genius. Upon hearing this, your brain releases a cascade of pleasure. Your body reacts exactly as if you had already achieved the feat. You get drunk on the sweet nectar of triumph, feel the crown on your head, and experience the deep satisfaction of the winner. But it is a false triumph. It is a banquet of smoke. You have given your mind the reward without having crossed the battlefield. And the mind, which is a creature of extreme efficiency, reaches a lethal conclusion. If I have already received the respect and pleasure of success just by talking about it, why would I subject myself to the pain, uncertainty, sweat, and insomnia required to build the real work? The motivation dies because it already ate the dessert before lighting the kitchen fire. By speaking, you have castrated your own will. You have become the tavern jester who tells stories of dragons he has never faced while his sword rusts in a corner. The true monarch starves his ego in the early stages of creation. He is silent. He denies it the arms of premature applause. He keeps it isolated, cold, and hungry in the cell of anonymity, so that the enraged ego, desiring glory, uses all its rage in the brutal and undeniable execution of the work in the physical plane. The king does not drink from the nectar until the head of his enemy lies at his feet. There is a darker threat that activates the moment your words leave your lips: the contamination of the ether by the gaze of others. Even if you assume those around you love you, the human subconscious is a labyrinth of silent envies and fears. When you announce you are going to jump into the void to claim a treasure, you are attacking the comfort zone of those who listen. Your ambition unmasks their cowardice. Your light threatens to show their shadows. Physically, they smile, but in the subtle planes, they resist you. Even the blind love of a mother can be an alchemical poison. If you tell an audacious project to one who loves you but is ruled by fear, that person will worry desperately. They will suffer imagining your failure, and worry is a lead anchor. It is a destructive visualization held by the bond of love. It stops your movement. In primitive occultism, This dense force was called the evil eye, not about fairy tale witches, but pure esoteric physics. Human thought emits radiation. Hidden envy, skepticism, and the fear projected by those who hear your plans adhere like a tar mist to the fragile structure of your creative seed. It poisons the work. When you break the law of concealment, you no longer just have to deal with your own fears. You have to drag the dead weight of the skepticism and cowardice of everyone you told your intentions to. The wise man does not allow the dirty soul of vulgar minds to step into his sanctuary. He covers his works with the mantle of absolute mystery. Approach the burning sands of antiquity and contemplate the effigy of the great Sphinx of Giza. That stone colossus was not sculpted as a simple monument. It is the guardian of the 4 fundamental pillars of magical power: to know, to dare, to will, and to keep silent. Many men master the first 3. They are smart, brave, and tenacious. Yet their works fail. They fail because they ignore the supreme mandate of the Sphinx, the 4th pillar that seals the operation. Silence is the inexpugnable wall that protects the other 3 powers. It is the dome that isolates the magical energy from the world's corrosion. The true master does not need to explain. He simply acts. His audacity is evident when the throne has already been taken. He does not announce what he wants. His will materializes suddenly, leaving spectators paralyzed. The Sphinx is the emblem of infinite power precisely because it has never opened its stone lips. It remains a mystery, guarding the secrets of pharaohs and the mysteries of stars, immutable, serene, heavy, and terrifying in its absolute silence. He who learns to be silent acquires the density and inscrutability of the Sphinx. To be like the Sphinx is to be invulnerable to the judgment of the world. Seal your jaw. From this precise moment, impose a state of siege on your vocal cords. Your goals, your spiritual revelations, the money you are about to earn, and the lands you will conquer must become a secret kept under 7 lead keys in the deepest catacomb of your soul. Walk through the world of mortals with an inscrutable smile. When they ask what you are doing, respond with cordial vagueness. Let them believe you are an ordinary man, that you are stuck, that your days pass in the same inertia in which they drown. Do not defend yourself against those who doubt you. Do not waste your energy trying to prove the vision of an eagle to a fool. Accept being underestimated. Enjoy the tactical privilege of going unnoticed. Darkness is the mantle that protects you from enemy archers. While the world sleeps in the illusion of your passivity, you will be descending every night to the underground forges. There, in the sealed silence where no one sees you, you will unleash the god of war. You will strike the anvil with a sacred violence, without spectators, without applause, without seeking comfort. You will endure the extreme heat of the closed crucible. You will accumulate pressure until your veins burn and your eyes glow. Every majestic birth demands the solitude of the cloister. Diamonds crystallize in suffocating blackness. The butterfly reassembles in the absolute enclosure of its silk coffin. The child forms in the mute abyss of the womb. premature light kills creation. And one day, without warning, the seal will break from within, not by your vanity, but by the weight of the finished work. The doors of your castle will burst open. You will come out into the sunlight dressed in majesty. The empires you forged in the dark will burst into the world with the impact of a comet. Those who underestimated you will be paralyzed by terror and fascination. They will look for some warning, some clue, but they will find nothing. They will not know where you came from. They will not understand how you managed to conquer the peak without them seeing you climb. They will watch you with the silent respect granted to mysteries, and you, from your throne, will contemplate their wonder with a cold and lethal calm. You will not give victory speeches. You will not explain your rise. Your existence will be the only proof needed. The work is done. The king has arrived. There is a tragic and colossal illusion in which the human race is submerged: the mirage of free will. The ordinary man wakes up every morning absolutely convinced that his thoughts are his own. He believes that the anger he feels is his own. He believes that the fear oppressing his chest is a natural reaction of his intellect. And he believes that the passions that drag him into arguments with his neighbors are the irrefutable proof of his freedom. But if an initiate with cleared spiritual vision contemplated the multitudes from the top of a mountain, he would not see millions of free individuals walking the earth. He would see an immense and docile flock of puppets tied by invisible threads that stretch toward the sky, threads ending in the claws of gigantic, dark, and voracious entities formed by clouds of dense mist. These entities are not mythical gods, nor demons from the underworld. They are beasts engendered by men themselves. In the doctrines of classical occultism and hermetic magic, these creatures are known by a fearsome name: the egregor. An egregor is an energetic entity, an autonomous psychic body that comes to life when thousands or millions of human beings focus their attention, their fear, or their adoration on the same idea. And once the beast wakes up, its only purpose is to subdue its creators, to ensure its own food. To understand how men hand over their power and create their own executioners, we must remember the story of the citadel of Kalin. Kalin was a prosperous and peaceful city. One day, news came that a terrible plague and an army of barbarians were approaching. Although the threat was still far away and the walls were strong, panic seized the citizens. In their desperation, the high priests ordered an immense idol of clay, ash, and iron to be built in the central square. They told the people that this idol, if they prayed to it with enough fervor, would come to life and protect them from evil. Day after day, night after night, the 50,000 inhabitants of Kalin knelt before the monstrous statue. They cried, they screamed in terror, they cut their hands to offer their blood. They begged for salvation. And then the unnatural happened. The statue, fed by the terror and collective hysteria of 50,000 souls for months, began to emit a deathly glow. The clay cracked and became dark flesh. The iron eyes lit up with a malignant fire. The idol came to life, but the beast did not walk toward the desert to face the barbarians. It stepped down from its pedestal and looked at the inhabitants with hunger. To stay alive, the monster needed to continue absorbing the same energy that had engendered it: pure terror. So the idol of ash began to terrorize the citadel. It demanded daily sacrifices. It tore down houses. It roared in the night. The city no longer feared the plague or the barbarians. Now they lived enslaved and terrified by the very monster they had created with their prayers of panic. One day, a wise hermit entered the city. Seeing the devastation, he stood in the middle of the square in front of the roaring beast. The idol raised its fist to crush him, but the sage did not shrink in fear. He did not pray. He did not flee. He simply crossed his arms, looked at it with absolute coldness and apathy, and yawned. The idol stopped dead, confused. The sage addressed the people who watched from the shadows. "Fools! This monster has no life of its own. Its body is made of the same clay and the same fear that you give it. Do not fight it. Turn your back on it. Return to your trades. Sing, work the land, and starve it to death." At first, they hesitated. But little by little, the men and women stopped looking at the beast. They ignored its threatening roars. They stopped offering tears. As the people withdrew their attention and their fear, the fire in the monster's eyes began to flicker. Its dark flesh dried up again. Its movements became clumsy. In less than a week, deprived of the emotional breath of the multitude, the fearsome idol became once again an inert and pathetic statue of dry clay. It turned to dust. You live today in a citadel besieged by idols much larger and more voracious. The human mind is not a closed vessel. It is a beacon that emits electromagnetic radiation toward the ether. When 1,000,000 people tune their minds to the same thought, to the same tragic news, to the same economic panic or political hatred, those millions of small clouds converge in the invisible sky. They merge, they condense, and by an irrefutable law of esoteric physics, that mass of energy acquires intelligence and its own will. An egregor has just been born. There are egregors of nations, egregors of political parties, egregors of fanatic religions, and the largest of all in our era, the egregor of panic and scarcity, fed daily by the heralds of disaster in every corner of the visible world. Once the egregor takes shape, it operates as a parasite. Its only imperative is to feed so as not to dissolve, and its exclusive food is the vibratory frequency that gave rise to it. If the egregor was born from hatred between two sides, it will extend its invisible tendrils, descend upon the minds of the commoners, and plant intrusive thoughts of distrust, fury, and bloodlust. It will force men to argue pointlessly, to insult each other, to hate their brothers. Men will believe they are defending great ideals when in reality they are only chewing the food that fattens the invisible parasite floating over their heads. The greatest triumph of the egregor is to convince the individual to abandon his solitary throne, to join the mass, the herd, The hive. When a man, no matter how brilliant, is submerged in a mob, his consciousness turns off. His sovereign spirit enters a state of lethargy, and his mind is kidnapped by the inferior spirit of the hive. The mass does not reason, it does not reflect, it does not seek truth. The mass only feels, and what it feels is invariably the densest, most basic and animal emotion, panic or fury. This is where the unwary traveler commits the most disastrous mistake of his spiritual life. The man realizes the system is corrupt. He discovers a tyranny imposed on his people. He fills his chest with noble indignation, raises the sword of justice, and declares war on the egregor. He becomes a fanatic. He spends his days debating, insulting those who defend the tyranny, protesting with fury, filling his mind with hatred toward the enemy. He believes he is destroying the monster, but he ignores the most macabre law of collective magic. The egregor feeds on resistance. In the realms of energy, devotion and hatred are the same. They are the same vibratory substance, only rotating in reverse. Fanatical love and fierce hatred share the same boiling temperature, the same obsessive fixation, and the same waste of vital force. The egregor of a tyrant does not care if you kneel to pray to him or rise with clenched fists shouting curses. In both cases, you are giving him your attention. The slave who hates the master with fury is as tied to the chain as the slave who adores him. Furious resistance is the most succulent feast for the ghost. The only way, the absolute and solitary way to annihilate the power that the hive mind has over your destiny is to wield the coldest, cruelest, and most majestic weapon in the arsenal of kings, the guillotine of indifference. There are no swords that can wound smoke. The only way to kill a ghost is to condemn it to absolute hunger, and to starve the egregors that have parasitized your life. You must subject your mind to a quarantine of tactical isolation. You must apply a surgical cut to the invisible umbilical cords. From today, you are strictly forbidden to let rumors alter your heart. If the whole world panics over an imminent crisis, you will take a step back. You will contemplate the terrified crowd. You will hear the din of those who wail, but you will not move a single facial muscle. You will wrap yourself in a dome of spiritual glass. You will flatly and coldly refuse to give a single drop of emotion to disaster. You will not comment on the disputes of the common people. When at the table they try to drag you into a debate about sides or collective fears, you will remain in frozen silence. When they demand your opinion, you will respond with the apathy of one who contemplates the struggle of two ants in the dust. You are above the game. True indifference is not ignorance. It is an act of calculated sovereignty. It is telling the universe, I know the game the shadows are playing, but I refuse to give them the fire of my attention. By withdrawing your attention, by depriving the egregor of your indignation and fear, the cord that united you to the beast rots and breaks. In the instant that disconnection occurs, you will experience an astonishing physical lightness. It is as if you had released a 100-pound iron yoke that you carried on your neck without knowing it. The shrill noise that once tormented your head will turn off. Your mind will recover the sharp clarity of pure crystal. You are free. The price of this disconnection is isolation, not physical confinement in a cave, but the isolation of the spirit. The initiate who disconnects from the hive mind walks among men but no longer belongs to their kingdom. Free from the parasitism of the egregor, your reactions are no longer predictable. You do not laugh at what the mass laughs at. You do not cry for what the mass cries for. You do not fear what the mass fears. This will cause rejection in the weak. Those still plugged into the hive will look at you with suspicion. They will call you insensitive, selfish, apathetic. They will accuse you of having no empathy for the pain of the world. Do not give in an inch. Do not try to justify yourself. Their false empathy is nothing more than the complacency of wallowing together in the mud of collective fear. The sovereign knows that the only real way to help a sick world is not to catch the same disease to show solidarity. The only possible salvation is to rise above the pavilion of the infected, build a castle of unshakable health, and from there throw the ropes so that the few who have the courage to climb can get out of the pit. The void you create around you by disconnecting from the egregor acts as an impenetrable armor. While the world out there collapses, breaks, despairs, and devours itself in cyclical crises, you will remain in your center, serene and untouchable. Like the hunter who lurks from the top of the hill, you will watch the clumsy movements below with the frozen compassion of the stars. Raise your gaze above the dark smoke that covers the city of sleeping men. Watch them run, tremble, and worship the idols of ash they themselves have erected with their cowardice. Observe them, but do not judge them with anger, for anger would chain you again to their misery. The world is a theater of illusions, and the egregors are the directors of a macabre play where entry is paid with the blood of the soul. But you are no longer part of the cast. You have handed in the script, stepped off the stage, and walked into the darkness of the hall where no one can dictate your emotions. Withdraw today the devotion you have given to the suffering of the majorities. Let the collective ghosts die of hunger in the public squares, deprived of the breath of your indignation. Keep every drop of your prana to forge the only entity that has the divine right to reign over your existence. The overwhelming weight of your own sovereign will. The throne on the mountain awaits. The silence of the heights is your only true counselor. Rise now and let the phantoms of the valley fade into the distance. Contemplate the starry sky and the ruins of ancient civilizations that lie beneath the dust of the desert. Everything in the observable universe, from the birth of galaxies to the heartbeat in your own chest, obeys a respiratory law, a cosmic inhalation and exhalation that never stops. Every empire that rises to touch the sun inevitably collapses to bite the mud. The coldest winter gives way to spring, and the most scorching summer is devoured by autumn. The universe is an immense and heavy steel pendulum that oscillates perpetually between two extremes. And the ordinary man has committed the stupidity of tying himself voluntarily to the base of that pendulum. Look at the crowd. When luck smiles on them, when they accumulate a few gold coins, when love knocks on their door, or when the world pays them a fleeting tribute, they are filled with senseless euphoria. They become drunk with arrogance, celebrate loudly, and lower their defenses. They convince themselves that summer will last forever. But the supreme law of the universe lacks mercy. The measure of the movement to the right inexorably dictates the measure of the movement to the left. The pendulum reaches its peak, stops for a fraction of a second, and begins its brutal descent. The gold vanishes. Love is corrupted. Tragedy knocks on the door. And those same men who yesterday laughed with pride, today crawl in corners, tearing their garments, drowned in a miserable depression, wondering why the heavens have abandoned them. They are thrown from light to darkness, and from darkness to light, again and again, until old age and madness consume their bones. They are victims of the rhythm. In this chapter, we are going to break the chains that tie you to the base of the cosmic clock. You are going to enter the science of the highest occultism and learn the art of higher polarization. You will discover that although you cannot stop the movement of the universe, you possess the absolute power to raise your consciousness above the edge of the blade, becoming the untouchable master of your own destiny. The rhythm will no longer be your executioner, but the music to which you dance from the heights of your center. Prepare to climb the axis of the world and look down upon the storm with eyes of frozen fire. To understand the treacherous nature of emotion and the poison of extremes, we must travel back in time to the courts of ancient Babylon, where magic and the wisdom of the sages governed the fate of kings. The annals of mystery tell that there existed a fearsome emperor, a conqueror of nations and owner of incalculable riches. However, despite his immense military power, the emperor was a miserable slave to his own passions. His mind was a leaf blown by the storm. When his armies crushed an enemy nation, the emperor organized banquets of unrestrained euphoria that lasted for weeks. He became blind with arrogance, neglected his borders, and wasted his treasure. But when a drought hit his lands or a rebellion broke out in a distant province, the same emperor locked himself in his chambers, pale with terror, paralyzed by anguish, and plunged into a melancholy so deep that he could not utter a single command. Aware that his emotional oscillations would destroy his reign, he called for the wisest and oldest of his alchemists, a silent man who inhabited the caves of the crystal mountains. "Master," the emperor begged him, "my spirit is a sea in a storm. When I win, glory makes me stupid and blind. When I lose, fear turns me into a coward. Make me an artifact, a talisman that protects me from the drunkenness of victory and rescues me from the despair of defeat." The alchemist nodded in silence and retired to his forges. Months later, he returned to the throne room and handed the emperor a sober and cold ring forged in meteoric iron. set with a dark sapphire as deep as the night. "Majesty," the old man whispered, "this is not a talisman of vulgar sorcery. I have engraved an inscription on the hidden part of the ring, under the stone where it directly touches your skin. When the world kneels at your feet and you feel that you are an untouchable god, take off the ring and read the inscription. It is your anchor. And when the world crumbles around you and you feel that death is the only way out, take off the ring and read exactly the same inscription. Only then will you preserve your empire." Years later, the emperor fought the greatest battle of his history. His enemies were crushed. The treasures of 3 nations filled his coffers. The whole people cheered his name, throwing flowers in his path. Feeling his chest bursting with pride and that his power was infinite, the emperor, with a smile of arrogance, remembered the alchemist's promise. He took off the iron ring and read the hidden inscription. The engraved words said, "This too shall pass, for the pendulum returns." In a millisecond, the emperor's smile froze. The euphoria dissipated like smoke in the cold wind. The illusion of eternity broke. Realizing that glory was ephemeral, he regained his lethal coldness, ordered his generals to strengthen defenses, prevented the waste of the banquet, and saved his nation from a surprise counterattack already being planned. A decade later, a devastating plague decimated his army. His allies betrayed him. His walls were besieged, and hunger ravaged the city. Sitting on his throne in the middle of darkness, surrounded by advisors crying over the imminent fall of the empire, the king felt terror threatening to paralyze his heart. He reached for the ring. With trembling hands, he took it off and read the inscription once more. "This too shall pass, for the pendulum is already returning." Immediately, the terror vanished from his spirit. He understood that pain and ruin were as illusory and fleeting as the victory of old. His chest filled with a frozen and unshakable calm. He stood up, organized a masterful strategy based on patience and attrition, and resisted the siege with a fierce will of ice. Months later, the exhausted enemy retreated into the desert. The emperor died in old age, having ruled with an iron hand, immutable before hell and paradise. He was no longer a slave to the swing, but the master of the center. Listen with frozen blood to the implications of this parable, for it contains the death trap in which dreamers perish. The man who starts the path of power, who learns to concentrate his mind and execute his plans with determination, will inevitably begin to taste the honey of material victory. Doors will open and gold will fill his coffers. And it is in this precise and microscopic instant of glory that the novice commits the most devastating tactical error of his existence. He allows himself to fall into euphoria. Society has deceived you, teaching you that euphoria and extreme joy are virtuous and desirable states. They tell you that when you achieve a goal, you must jump with joy, shout your victory to the 4 winds, celebrate to exhaustion, and let emotion overflow you. But in the court of esoteric physics, euphoria is a lethal poison. It is the energetic signature of ignorance. What is euphoria in its deepest root? It is the surprise of a slave who has received a prize. It is the astonishment of one who deep down believed he did not deserve it. A king does not jump with hysterical astonishment when his servants serve him wine in his own castle. The king assumes the service with a heavy calm because it is his divine right. Only the beggar who finds a bag of coins in the trash screams with euphoria. But the danger goes far beyond simple indignity. The danger lies in the law of compensation. When you experience an emotion of extreme joy, you are pushing the pendulum of the universe to the right with enormous violence. You are injecting an excess of force into the oscillating movement of your own destiny. By immutable law, that pendulum that you have pushed to the peak of euphoria will stop, accumulate potential energy, and fall to the left with exactly the same violence, the same speed, and the same weight with which you pushed it. The universe will collect the debt of your emotional overflow. This is why, a few days after a great loud celebration, after an excessive exaltation or a boastful triumph, the man suffers an inexplicable accident, loses a significant sum of money, falls into a bed with fever, or suffers a devastating betrayal. And blind to cosmic laws, the man says, "What bad luck, just when things were good." There was no bad luck. There was pure physics. He himself financed his misfortune by becoming intoxicated with the chalice of his own triumph. He pushed the pendulum with his joy, and the pendulum returned with the same force to strike him in the dark. The wise man knows that every high has a low unless he remains in the middle. To escape this cycle of torture and reward, we must analyze the geometry of a pendulum. Imagine a large, old grandfather clock with an immense steel blade swinging from side to side. The entire humanity is clinging to the lower base of that blade. Down there at the bottom, the movement is wider and faster. Those who cling to that base are dragged at great speed from joy to tears, from health to disease, from opulence to misery. Trying to stop the pendulum with bare hands, trying to block the circumstances of the outside world so that nothing changes, is a useless effort that will end by amputating your arms. The material world will change. Economies will collapse. Bodies will age. Empires will fall. But if you raise your gaze up the steel rod of the pendulum toward the top, you will find the fulcrum, the support point, the axis on which the blade swings. At the support point, there is no movement. Although the base of the pendulum travels miles, the axis remains in absolute, silent, and immovable stillness. The mastery of occultism does not consist in stopping the pendulum of life. It consists in executing the art of higher polarization. It consists in letting go of the emotional base, climbing up the rod of cold will, and establishing the seat of your consciousness at the support point. Higher polarization is the absolute mastery over your own nervous system. It is the establishment of a dictatorship of ice in the center of your chest. When life hands you the sweetest victory, when you close the monumental deal, or when the enemy falls at your feet, you invoke in that exact millisecond the memory of the sapphire seal. You bite your tongue. You hold your breath. You look at your material victory with a tactical and frozen detachment. You flatly refuse to hand over an overflowing emotion to success. You smile, yes, but with the light and bored smile of the monarch who already knew he was going to win before the game began. By refusing to experience euphoria, you are preventing the pendulum from swinging violently to the right. You are absorbing the impact of victory at the support point. And the result of this coldness is the greatest magic trick in the universe. By not having pushed the pendulum toward the extreme of excessive pleasure, the pendulum will have no momentum to return and hit you with pain. You have neutralized the law of compensation. And in the same way, when the outside world enters chaos, when markets crash, when a storm threatens to sweep your lands, or when betrayal appears at your table, the animal instinct will demand that you cry and enter into panic. In that crucial second, you will apply the same ruthless rule. You will retreat to the support point. You will look at the outer disaster and refuse to involve your soul in the mud. You will contemplate your ruin with a deep and sovereign apathy. The demons of fear will die of hunger in front of you. By refusing to suffer, by refusing to vibrate on the scale of panic, the pendulum of misfortune will slide over your armor of indifference without being able to drag you to the abyss. You have become the supreme spectator. The material world moves, but you remain anchored in stillness. This posture of coldness and equanimity will not turn you into a lifeless being, as ignorant men fear, confusing peace with death. On the contrary, higher polarization will grant you a reserve of energy so colossal that your simple daily movements will be charged with a crushing gravity. Society, the press, your adversaries, and energetic parasites operate under the premise that they can control a man if they can predict his emotions. If the enemy knows he can provoke anger, he governs you. If the flatterer knows he can buy your favor through praise and make you feel euphoric, the flatterer dominates you. If the financial system knows it can terrify you with the threat of poverty, the system is your owner. The emotional man is a puppet with very thick strings, easily manipulated by anyone who passes by on the street. But when the world tries to pull your strings and discovers that you have cut them with the scissors of neutrality, when the provocateur insults you and you look at him with the same cold expression with which you look at an old piece of furniture, when the flatterer sings your praises and you nod without vanity, the world enters panic. The energy vultures retreat confused. They cannot read you. They cannot predict your next step. By not offering them the friction of hate or the softness of need, you become unmanageable. Your imperturbable silence becomes a psychological weapon of mass destruction. Your competitors will make huge mistakes guided by desperation. Those around you will seek your favor with a respect bordering on reverence. Because in a world where everyone is dragged by hysteria, the only man who remains still in the middle of the hurricane is perceived instinctively and undeniably as the legitimate owner of the wind. Your stillness is the command that quiets the storm. There is a poisonous and deeply rooted dream in the heart of the multitudes, the infantile fantasy of the free miracle. The ordinary man, consumed by the inertia of his days and the weight of his own mediocrity, kneels in the darkness of his bedroom and raises pleas to the infinite. He asks for overflowing wealth. He demands an unshakable love, claims an iron health, and dreams of the absolute respect of his peers. And after uttering his demands, he crosses his arms and waits. He waits for existence, in an act of supposed mercy, to descend from the heavens and deposit these treasures in his lap without asking him for absolutely anything in return. He believes that the universe is a charity institution. He believes that his past suffering has granted him a credit, a right to be compensated. He ignores, in his monumental blindness, that existence operates under the rigor of a ledger of unnegotiable mathematical coldness and accuracy. In the ancient mysteries of alchemy, the law that governs the transmutation of matter and human destiny is unshakable. The law of equivalent exchange. You cannot obtain something of supreme value if you are not willing to destroy, burn, and deliver something of identical vibratory weight. For a new order to be born, the old must be sacrificed. Greatness is not a gift, it is bought. And the currency of exchange is never metallic gold, but the voluntary detachment from that which you cling to most. To illustrate the misery of those who desire gold without delivering the dross, we must enter the dusty streets of ancient Samarkand, city of merchants, mages, and beggars, where the legends of transmutation were whispered in the corners. They say that at the gates of the great bazaar there lived a beggar named Tariq. For 20 years, Tariq had dragged a lame leg, leaning on an old and knotted staff made of ash wood. His staff was his most prized possession. With it, he feigned a much more serious lameness than he actually suffered, managing to awaken the pity of rich travelers who threw him copper coins. Tariq hated his poverty, but he loved the compassion of others that his staff procured for him. One evening, an old man in a dark robe and with penetrating eyes stopped in front of him. He was a master alchemist who had mastered the art of the philosopher's stone. Reading the greed in his soul, the old man offered him an unusual deal. "I have seen your misery, Tariq, and I have decided to open the doors of opulence to you," said the alchemist, pulling out from under his cloak a small crucible of glowing iron whose fire did not consume his hands. "This is the crucible of equivalent exchange. Throw inside it any object that belongs to you, and the fire will devour its form to return to you exactly its same weight in pure gold." The eyes of Tariq flashed with a feverish greed. Without thinking twice, he searched his pockets and found a rusty nail. He threw it into the crucible. The flames flickered, and the nail melted in a breath. At the bottom of the vessel remained a tiny and imperceptible drop of gold. The beggar, euphoric, understood that the old man did not lie. He took off one of his broken sandals, dirty and smelly, and threw it into the fire. The flame rose, consumed the worn leather, and in its place appeared a gold nugget the size of an acorn. Tariq screamed with joy, calculating how many banquets he could pay for with that. The alchemist, with an inscrutable face, lowered the crucible and said, "The fire does not distinguish between garbage and nobility. It only responds to the weight of what you deliver. If you wish to stop being a beggar forever, if you wish to buy a palace, lands, and horses, you must deliver something of true volume. Give me your ash staff." Tariq froze. He looked at the fire and then looked at his knotted staff. That piece of wood was heavy. If he threw it into the crucible, the resulting gold would be enough to live like a prince for the rest of his days. But terror seized his guts. If he delivered the staff, his real lameness would improve, as he would stop forcing the posture. He would no longer inspire pity. He could no longer receive the sure coins of the merchants. The staff was the guarantee of his victimhood. It was his identity. Squeezing the wood against his chest, the beggar stepped back. "No," he whispered with a trembling voice. "I can give you my other sandal. I can give you my rags, but not the staff. I need it to walk. Without it, people will not look at me with pity. I will die." The alchemist looked at him with a frozen and lethal compassion. He extinguished the crucible with a slight movement of his hand. "You demand the crown of a king, but you refuse to let go of the crutches of... If you demand a colossal fortune that ensures your bloodline for generations, you must sacrifice your weekends of sterile leisure, your nights of ephemeral drunkenness, and the terrifying fear of what others will think when you start charging the real value of your work. If you demand the pure, unconditional, and sovereign love of a worthy partner, you have to throw into the crucible your pathological need for attention, your infantile jealousy, and the cowardly refuge of toxic relationships. The tragic error of humanity is trying to cheat the scale. The ordinary man approaches the crucible of destiny and throws in rusty nails. He delivers tiny sacrifices that cost him nothing. He reads one book a week, makes a mediocre effort for a couple of days, stops complaining for an hour, and then peeks into the crucible, indignant, shouting, "I have made the sacrifice. Where is my throne? Where is my gold?" Existence, impassive and mute, returns to him exactly the equivalent of his effort, a miserable drop of success that evaporates the next day. The scale is blind. You cannot bribe it with good intentions. It does not care about your tears. It does not care how much you have suffered in the past. Inertial suffering is not legal tender currency in the esoteric world. Only the voluntary, conscious, and painful sacrifice of that which you love, but which destroys you, has the specific weight to alter the gravity of your destiny. The most expensive tribute, the ultimate sacrifice that alchemy demands, is rarely a material object. The universe does not need your money or your possessions. The supreme sacrifice that the crucible demands is the immolation of your old identity. Why is it so difficult to change? Why do men understand the laws and still fail? Because, like the beggar of Samarkand, they have fallen in love with their own staff. Victimhood is an exquisite, sweet, and addictive drug. When you assume the role of victim, when you say you have no money because the system is unfair, when you say you are alone because everyone betrays you, you get a hidden benefit. You obtain absolution. You are not responsible for your misery. The fault lies with the outside world. And furthermore, you get the consolation prize of slaves, the compassion of others. Your friends pity you, pat you on the back, and tell you, "Poor you, how much you have suffered. It is not your fault." It is a lie. That compassion is the food of your weak ego. Asking a man to abandon his victimhood is asking him to throw himself into the fire. If you throw your role of victim into the crucible, you will gain absolute control of your life. You will be the undeniable master of your destiny. But terror paralyzes your guts because the weight of failure will fall entirely, exclusively, and crushingly upon your own shoulders. No one will feel pity for you anymore. The step toward greatness is a step toward a frozen and intimidating solitude. It is the solitude of absolute responsibility. You cannot take your old skin to the new kingdom. The door of royalty is too narrow for you to pass through, dragging the bags of garbage from your past. You have to strip naked. You have to tear from your spirit the label of unfortunate man, of exploited employee, of betrayed lover. That identity death is the true pain of the alchemical fire. It hurts to stop being the person you have been for decades, even if that person was a wretch, because it was a known misery. But until you observe your own expired identity burning and becoming ashes on the altar, the universe will not deliver to you the substance of the king. You must die to the old self to be born to the new. There are only two paths through which man pays the tribute that life demands. There is no third path. Every creature born under the sun must cancel its debt, either through inertial suffering or through voluntary fire. Inertial suffering is the path of the vast majority. It is the destiny of the coward who refuses to change. As this man refuses to let go of his attachments, refuses to abandon his vices, and clings to his mediocrity, the karmic debt of his existence accumulates. And the universe, which is the most inclement collector of eternity, ends up breaking into his life by force. It tears away his health through disease and his love through pain. It snatches his partner through betrayal or destroys his finances in a devastating bankruptcy. The inertial man suffers horribly. He loses what he loved, but he obtains in exchange no wisdom, no power, and no elevation of his consciousness. He is crushed by the gears of life without having participated in the forge. Voluntary fire, on the contrary, is the supreme act of immolation of the chosen. The sovereign does not wait for the universe to come and collect the tribute. The sovereign walks by his own feet toward the altar of sacrifices. He observes his own life with forensic coldness, identifies the comforts and habits that cage him, and invokes the fire. With an act of will that borders on the divine, he takes his own attachments and throws them into the crucible. He inflicts upon himself the pain of detachment. He pays the price in advance. When you choose short-term suffering to forge long-term discipline, when you decide to tear out by the root the people who sink you before life uses them to destroy you, when you yourself impose the hunger of temporary austerity to finance your empire, you are executing voluntary fire. And the miracle is that the universe respects this. The universe feels a reverential respect before the man capable of burning himself by his own will. Seeing that you do not need to be pressured, seeing that you are the priest of your own immolation, existence retreats, lowers its punishing weapons, tips the scale in your favor, and pours over you abundance. What are you holding in your hands right now? What hidden crutch are you squeezing against your chest while you loudly demand that the gates of glory be opened to you? From this day on, ignorance has lost its anesthetic effect. You can no longer shield yourself in the fantasy that your lack of results is bad luck. The universe has been listening to you since the first heartbeat in your cradle. It has been holding the gold scale in front of your eyes, patiently waiting for you to put some real weight on the bronze plate. The era of mediocre sacrifices and rusty nails is over. If you truly desire the empire of peace, you must pay. You must look fixedly at the purifying fire and pay the stipulated price without shedding a single tear of self-pity. Cut off the excuse that you are not ready. Preparation is forged inside the crucible, not outside of it. Murder the lie that you do not know how. You only need the inhuman courage to let go of the staff. Take your victimhood. Take your past traumas that you are so fond of. Take your infantile need to please the plebeians and throw them into the flames. Watch the fire of alchemy devour your excuses. Feel the heat burn the old skin you are shedding. Prepare to receive the impact of your new power. The forge is ready. There is an unexplored realm, a vast, dark, and terrifying continent in which the whole of humanity spends a third of its mortal existence. It is the realm of sleep. For the ordinary man, sleep is nothing more than a temporary cessation of his physical functions, a small daily death, a passive truce where the body rests and the mind turns off. But the deep mind, the unfathomable ocean of the subconscious that governs the tides of material existence, never sleeps. While your body lies inert in the bed, that colossal force continues to work with a silent fury, molding events, attracting circumstances, and weaving the web of your destiny for the following dawn. The supreme secret does not reside in sleep itself, but in the narrow and misty border that separates wakefulness from unconsciousness. That twilight state, that corridor of shadows where reason begins to dissolve and the body becomes heavy, is what the ancient masters called the crossing of the threshold under the gloom. It is the hypnagogic state, the most sacred and most neglected moment of the human day, a moment the masses have squandered every single night without a second thought. To understand this, remember the fall of the kingdom of Or. The king of Or was obsessed with the security of his empire. During the day, his castle was impregnable, solid iron doors, stone walls that defied the clouds, and his best sentinels in every turret. No enemy could cross his domains while the sun shone. And yet, the kingdom began to rot from within. Harvests woke up withered. Treasures disappeared in silence. An aura of disease leaked through the marble halls. The oldest sage of the court, a blind man who read the secrets in the wind, approached the throne and said, "Majesty, the thief enters your domains every night, exactly at the instant in which the sun sets and the moon has not yet risen. He enters under the gloom. You close the oak door with chains, but in your private chambers there is a small wooden door that leads to the forest. Each night, burdened by the weariness and fears of ruling, you lie in your bed and leave that small door open. You fall asleep lamenting the problems of the kingdom, and it is through that unguarded door that the thief slides in. He feeds on your complaints, plants poison in your fertile earth, and loots your peace. Of what use is the armor you wear under the sun if you hand over the key to your kingdom in the shadows of the night? You are that king, and your mind is the desecrated castle. During your waking hours, the conscious mind, the rational sentinel, filters information and lets you navigate the outer world. But as the day ends, exhaustion weakens the fortress of your reason. You enter hypnagogia, that dense, heavy phase where the body begins to paralyze, but consciousness still flickers. That is the back door of your chambers, and under the gloom the sentinel drops his sword. In that exact millisecond, the door of your deep mind is left wide open, absolutely defenseless, devoid of any rational filter. It is the most vulnerable and the most powerful moment of your entire day. The subconscious is a land of terrifying and magical fertility. It does not reason. It does not debate or judge whether an idea is good or bad. Its only and blind cosmic function is to take the last seed deposited in it before consciousness goes out and incubate it through the night. If you drop an oak seed, it returns a forest. If you drop poison, it returns thorns. It obeys without asking a single question. The ordinary man performs a macabre ritual on his bed every night. In his last 10 minutes of wakefulness, he reviews his debts with obsessive detail, chews on the anger of yesterday's insults, imagines with terror tomorrow's confrontations, and relives his most humiliating failures. While his reason vanishes, his last conscious emotion is fear or revenge or the bitter taste of self-pity. By falling asleep in this state, he has executed the most destructive act of black magic possible, handing his deep mind a mold stained with blood and misery, ordering it to construct tomorrow's tragedy while he snores in ignorance. Every morning is the harvest of the nightmare he chose to cultivate in the sacred silence of the threshold. He is the architect of his own prison, and he has never once suspected it. The true monarch treats the last minutes of wakefulness with the same focused intention with which a general prepares the decisive battle. When your body lies in the bed and the material world begins to dissolve, you stop any thought about the past or the frictions of the day. In that state of deep physical passivity, you summon in the theater of your mind the emotional state of your greatest consummated triumph. Not a hope, not a plan. The accomplished reality, the finished work, the consolidated empire, the absolute peace of one who no longer has battles to fight. But mental vision alone is insufficient. The key of implantation demands the full invocation of the physical body. In the gloom of your bedroom, you must induce the exact tactile sensation of your desire already fulfilled. How does the weight of gold feel in your hands? Feel its metallic cold. How does the crown feel on your forehead? Feel the pressure on your temples, calm and certain. How does a man sigh who no longer has a single debt in the world? Feel the immense and glorious relief that floods his lungs as he exhales that final, victorious breath. Dress yourself in that emotion. Wrap yourself in the unshakable certainty of victory as if it were a mantle of ermine and purple. You are not asking. You are decreeing. You are not waiting. You are possessing the state. Allow sleep to drag you toward the abyss, but ensure that the last boat in which you sail toward unconsciousness is loaded with the treasure of your final state, not the debris of your fears. When you cross the threshold bathed in the silent ecstasy of victory, the hermetic miracle occurs. Your conscious mind turns off, and the golden seed falls directly into the immense jaws of your subconscious. Since there is no logical sentinel to debate the idea, it receives your decree as an unnegotiable divine mandate. It does not say, "But my bank account is empty." It only recognizes the monumental vibration of victory you have delivered, and obeys with the submission of a chained giant given its first true command. During the hours of darkness, your body rests, but your spirit becomes a radioactive colossus operating in the ether, breaking down doors, altering wills, and orchestrating synchronicities, preparing the field of matter so that three-dimensional reality is forced, without any possible escape, to reflect the reign you imposed in the shadows of your bedroom. The mastery of the night threshold has a twin brother just as sacred: the moment of waking. That state of fragility you experience in the first instant the morning light touches your eyelids, before the weight of the world crashes back, is the hypnopompic state, the return journey. The door of the secret chamber is still ajar. The inertial man ruins his dawn in the same way he poisoned his sunset, opening his eyes and immediately flooding his mind with frustrations, resentments, and duties, then reaching for mundane devices that contaminate his vision before setting a single foot on the ground. The monarch shields his dawns with methodical cruelty. Keep your eyes closed a few moments longer. Invoke again the unshakable certainty of your victory. Feel the absolute gratitude for the air in your lungs and for the invisible empire already yours. Do not ask that the day be good. Decree it. Get up without haste, with the deliberate movements of a feline in the thicket. Protect the first hour of your day with the zeal of a dragon guarding the last treasure in a burning world. The civilized man is absolutely convinced that the only way to transmit his will to another human being is through the clumsy noise of words. Under this deception, he becomes a slave to persuasion, gesturing, arguing, raising his voice, smiling falsely, threatening, and begging. He exhausts his vital energy trying to push the mind of the other through the brute force of speech. And most of the time, he fails bitterly, because words awaken immediate resistance and distrust in the heart of the listener. But in the highest realms of arcane knowledge, the sages know that the vacuum separating one physical body from another is not a vacuum at all. It is a vibrant, conductive ocean, the ether, the invisible web that connects your mind with the mind of every creature that breathes upon the face of the earth. Your mental and emotional state broadcasts in every direction, every second of every day. The people around you receive that broadcast at a level far deeper than conscious thought. Ancient annals tell of a relentless warlord whose army camped at the gates of a peaceful citadel at dawn. At midnight, a single man came out, unarmed, without armor. A master of inner mysteries, an old man with an unfathomable gaze. The guards captured him and dragged him before the warlord. The chieftain drew his sword, struck the table, and began to shout, insulting him, filling the tent with threats and the fierce laughter of his generals. The old emissary did not utter a single word. He simply stood anchored to the earth, relaxed his breath, and submerged his consciousness inward. In his mind, he did not see a bloodthirsty general. He saw a scared child wrapped in a steel tantrum. He invoked a vibration of peace, so absolute and dense it seemed made of lead, flooding the invisible space of the tent with the heavy certainty that the war had already ended, emitting that frequency through the ether with the power of a scorching sun. Little by little, something unnatural happened. The warlord's shouts lost strength. The laughter of the generals died, replaced by a suffocating discomfort. An invisible weight fell on the room. The chieftain felt the air become thick. A sudden fatigue invaded his bones. The fury that had fueled him evaporated, absorbed and neutralized by the black hole of the old man's absolute calm. After 15 minutes of deathly silence, the warlord dropped his sword, fell to his knees, overwhelmed by a dread bordering on reverence, and ordered his generals to strike camp. The army retreated before dawn, defeated and dominated by a man who never needed to open his mouth. He won in the silence of the ether. Your brain and heart are industrial transmitters of electromagnetic signals. When the ordinary man enters a room feeling inferior and desperate for approval, he emits chaotic static, and people instinctively feel contempt. When the true monarch crosses the threshold, physics alters. His vibration emits a mute but deafening command. My kingdom is complete. I need nothing from you. My authority is non-negotiable. People feel the gravitational impact of a superior mass entering their orbit, and obeying the immutable law that the lighter body must revolve around the heavier, they bend their will and seek the approval of the silent man who has just usurped the invisible throne. Weight is power, and weight is built in the silence of the forge, never in the noise of the streets. When you need to bend a situation in your favor, prepare before the physical encounter. In the solitude of your chambers, enter absolute immobility. Close your eyes and summon the image of the person you are going to face, with sovereign neutrality, not hostility. Formulate a single definitive command in your mind, not a plea or a hope, an irrevocable sentence. Inject it with the weight of physical certainty. Feel the cold relief of knowing this individual has already obeyed. Condense that certainty into a sphere of dense light and project it through the ether, a silent missile that penetrates the subconscious of the absent individual, planting your will so deeply that they will believe it was their own idea. When you meet them face to face, execute the law of absorption. Sit with the relaxation of one for whom the outcome matters as much as dust. Hold the silence, heavy, absolute, and suffocating. As that silence expands, their mind will panic and overtalk, filling the void with concessions and doubt. The polarity of the room inverts without a single word from you. When you finally speak, your words are few, slow, and sharp as a blade. They will submit, believing it was their own choice all along. The victory was won in the invisible. The physical world is just a mirror following the heavy lead of your internal state. You have walked the darkest corridors of forbidden knowledge and now possess the complete arsenal of a forger of worlds. And yet there exists a final abyss in which men perish. Those who, even possessing all the weapons, lack the singular strength to hold them steady. It is the plague of the divided mind. Observe the inertial man. His vital energy is an immense lake, but its waters spill in 1,000 directions. One current pulls toward wealth, another deviates toward revenge, another escapes toward nightly pleasures. His thoughts collide and cancel each other out. He possesses light, but scattered, weak, and incapable of warming even his own hands in the middle of winter. The power of manifestation does not respond to physical effort. It responds to the degree of psychic concentration you are able to sustain. A mind unified behind a single command moves mountains.
A mind fragmented between 100 desires moves nothing. Remember the chronicles of Karaman. A powerful warlord could not breach the mythical obsidian gate with 10,000 men, rams, fire, and months of brutal assault. Then an old master glassblower built a single immense convex lens from melted desert sand and placed it in front of the gate at high noon. The same sunlight that had been falling harmlessly across the entire valley, warming stones and dust with diffuse heat, was forced by the crystal to converge on a single microscopic point of unbearable white light at the center of the gate. Within minutes, the unbreakable bronze began to melt like warm wax. The gate swung open. The old man turned to the stunned chieftain and delivered the sentence that contains the entire secret of power. The gate did not yield to the sun. The sun was always there. The gate yielded to the annihilation of dispersion. You face the obsidian gates of your own destiny every single day, and you have been attacking them with brute force and fragmented attention that cancels itself out before reaching the target. The true iron will has nothing to do with effort or muscular tension. It is the silent, icy, and lethal ability to fix the attention of your mind on a single mandate of greatness and allow all other ideas to starve to death around it for lack of attention. The sovereign does not fight his fears. He simply withdraws his gaze from them. He does not debate with laziness. He ignores it with the same coldness with which he would ignore a crushed insect on the road. He holds the lens in place, pulse steady, breath controlled, and allows the unified ray to do the work of piercing matter. For your mind to stop being the scattered lamp and become the ray that cuts steel, you must subject your ego to the sacred torture of immobility. The ego is a scared monkey addicted to novelty, jumping from branch to branch, manufacturing urgent distractions, sending painful memories, physical itches, and whispers of doubt the moment you command it to be still. Apply the jailer's rigor. Sit in the gloom. Fix your mind on the throne of your consummated empire. When a foreign thought sneaks into the chamber, and it will, within seconds, do not get angry. Anger is another leak. Simply, with the movement of a silent guillotine, decapitate the thought and move the light of your attention back to the throne. 100 times the monkey will escape. 100 times, with cold and terrifying patience, you drag it back by the neck. At first, this causes deep psychic pain. Your mind, addicted to the hemorrhage of dispersion, will feel suffocated. You will feel the urgent need to move, to open your eyes, to abandon the forge. If you yield, the crystal breaks and the gate stands forever. But if you resist, if you hold a single thought in the absolute vacuum of your consciousness 1 minute longer than yesterday, something miraculous happens. The friction disappears. The inner civil war turns off. The scattered beams of your awareness begin to bend and converge. There will no longer be 10,000 voices. There will be only one, deep, grave, and omnipotent. You have forged the unified ray. You are no longer a man with a mind. You are a mind with a man. To keep the ray sharp, become the relentless assassin of alternatives. The backup plan is the fissure through which magic bleeds out, the secret confession before the court of the universe that you do not truly believe in your own victory. Burn the ships. Master the destructive power of the most sacred word in the language. No. Say no to mediocre pleasures that divert your gaze. Say no to opportunities that do not point directly toward your singular obsession. Say no to relationships that drain your energy and dilute your focus. Every no tightens the lens. The cost of a unified mind is the death of all other lives you could have lived. Pay it gladly and without looking back. The journey has concluded. In a few moments, the sound of this voice will be extinguished, and silence will once again reclaim the room in which you find yourself. The words that have flooded your mind, the ancient laws, the secrets of the ether, the parables of the hermit and the alchemist and the sage in Kalen, will cease to vibrate in the air. They will settle definitively and irrevocably in the blood that runs through your veins, not as inspiration that fades by morning, as living knowledge forged into the architecture of who you are becoming. You have learned to seal your lips and guard the crucible of your creative energy. You have learned to disconnect from the egregors that feed on the fear of multitudes. You have learned to govern the pendulum of your emotions from the still point of the sovereign. You have delivered voluntary sacrifice to the purifying fire without flinching. You have infiltrated your own subconscious in the sacred crossing of the night threshold. You have emitted your will through the silent ocean of the ether, and you have condensed the unified ray of your supreme will into a single lethal point of focus that no obsidian gate can withstand. But before silence seals this predestined encounter, listen to one last ruthless warning. The abyss that separates the undeniable sage from the merely instructed fool is not found in the amount of secrets that both know. It is found in what both are willing to execute in the world of matter once the truth has been revealed. There is a terminal illness that haunts men at the end of this path: spiritual gluttony. The weak seeker falls in love with the search itself. He reads one grimoire after another, accumulates wisdom and frameworks and doctrines, sits comfortably in the stands, convinced that knowing the path is the same as walking it. This man becomes a walking library, but his bank account remains empty. His health withers. His bed is cold, and his life lacks an empire. The sovereign abhors sterile theory. Close the books. Turn off the external voices. Everything you need to bend reality, curve destiny, and subject existence to your will already beats with lethal fury in the exact center of your chest. It has always been there. Your duty is to erect a physical kingdom, an impregnable refuge of wealth and nobility, not out of selfish vanity, but to forge an eternal heritage, to protect your own, to raise a shield of opulence, liberty, and dignity around those who carry your blood, guaranteeing that your descendants never kneel before the miseries of the ordinary world. The laws of the ether will obey you with the same blind submission wherever you breathe today. The universe recognizes no borders. It only recognizes the gravitational weight of the man who has ceased to doubt himself. The fold of the masses has been left behind forever. The hysterical lamentations are over. The submission to circumstances is over. The begging for opportunities at the crossroads of life is over. From this second on, you assume your place as the primary cause of your own experience. Not a victim of circumstances, not a passenger in someone else's story. The architect, the builder, and the judge of the one life you have been given. Leave your chamber and enter the arena of the physical world. Go and reclaim without apology the empire you left abandoned while you slept. Love with an immensity that terrifies cowards. Forge your wealth by moving with precision through the empty spaces where the fearful refuse to go. Lead your destiny in the strictest and most absolute of silences, letting the work speak with a voice louder than any proclamation. Keep walking under the shadows, oblivious to the deafening noise of the blind, tracing with each of your deliberate acts a true and indelible path of power and knowledge. The forge is lit. The seed has been planted in the fertile dark of the night threshold. Raise your head. Open the jaws of your supreme ambition and allow the entire world to retreat before your step. Your reign has just begun. The shadows have served their purpose. The light you now carry is not to be hidden, but to be used as a tool of creation. Go forth, sovereign. Build that which time
cannot touch.
This has been MindRise Audiobooks. The work is complete. The architect is finally awake.